Yes, we're back. We're back with another installment of Storytime with Chris. As I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max or relax and chilling time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, study time, break time, CP time, anytime that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and music, and many, many more in between. Which I don't. All the music that's being played to you in the background by the wonderful Rosalie. Please go on YouTube and like, share, subscribe. That is, let me double check, capital ROSALIE, Rosalie. Check them out. Seriously, show them some love. Because this music is Celtic and it is appropriate for the story that we are reading. Now, the last time we were here, the three kids, Barney, Simon, and Jane, have reunited with Will and Brand, and they're all in Wales to then try to fulfill the last quest for the light against the rising of the dark. So we're going to go ahead and continue as we search for this monument with which to summon the sleepers once again to then gather for the final confrontation. So let's get into it. And then John Rowlands is reintroduced, and we also get to meet Mrs. Rowlands, his wife. And yeah, so they're about to go on this long hike and embark on this adventure. There we go. Chapter 6, The Bearded Lake. There was no rain at first, though clouds swirled over the blue sky like billowing smoke. Silent for want of breath, they toiled up the long winding lane that led up from the village of Aberduve into the hills. The road rose very steeply, climbing out of the broad valley of the Duve estuary, so that whenever they paused to look back, they could see spread beneath them a winding sweep of the coast and hills and the broad sea, with the silver ribbon of the Duve River snaking through gleaming acres of brown gold sand left by the falling tide. Then another bend in the lane cut away all this southern view, and they were left climbing towards the mountains of the north, not yet visible. High grassy banks enclosed them in the lane, banks as high as their heads, starred with yellow ragrot and hawkweed, white flatheads of yarrow, few late foxgloves. Higher yet above the banks, hedges of hazel and bramble and hawthorn reached to the sky, heavy with half-ripe berries and nuts and fragrant with invading honeysuckle. "Keep in," Will called from the rear. "Car!" They pressed themselves against the grass wall of the lane, dodging the prickly embrace of bramble shoots, while a bright red Minnie whipped past in a tenor snarl of low gear. "Visitors," Brad said. "That's the 6th. We're visitors too," Jane said. "Ah, but such a superior brand," said... Oh, excuse me, that was Barney. "Ah, but such a superior brand," said Barney solemnly. "At least you're walking on your legs," Brad said. He resettled the peaked, Swedish-type cap he wore over his white hair and gave it a resigned tug. "All these cars, they're like flies on a sunny day, this time of year, and because of them, up in the wild places you find not just the sheep and the wind and the emptiness now, but little wooden chalets for people from Birmingham." "No way out of it, is there?" Simon said. "I mean, there don't seem to be many ways left of making a living round here except tourism." "Farming, too," said Will. "Not for many." "True enough," Brad said. "The ones who go away to college after leaving school, they never come back. Nothing for them here." Jane said curiously, "Will you go away?" Duh, Brad said. "Have a heart. That's years away. Anything could happen. Power stations in the Estuary, holiday camps on Snowdon." "Watch out," Simon said suddenly. "Another one." This time the car was pale blue, chugging and coughing past them like a small tank. Two small children could be seen fighting in the back seat. It disappeared round the next bend. Cars, said Will. "Do you know there's even something on the Mahalan Road called the Chatal? A chatal, presumably a cross between a motel." He broke off, staring at the road ahead. "Look at that! Golly!" Barney grabbed Jane's arm, pointing. "Whatever are they?" Paused halfway across the lane, a few yards ahead of them, were two strange, sinuous animals. As big as cats but slender-bodied, their fur was reddish-ginger like the coat of a red fox. They had cat-like tails, held just above the ground. Their heads were turned a bright-eyed. They stared at the children, then first one and then the other deliberately, without haste, turned back and made off in a slinking, undulating motion across the road, apparently disappearing into the bank. "Stoats," Simon said. Barney looked doubtful. "Aren't they too big?" Much too big, said Bran, and these had white only on the muzzle. A stoat has a white belly and chest. What are they, then? Polecats, but I've never seen one bright red before. Bran went forward and peered cautiously at the bag, raising a warning hand as Simon joined him. Careful, they are not nice creatures. There's a rabbit hole. They must have taken it over. Funny, the cars don't seem to bother them, Barney said, or people for that matter. They're not very nice, Bran said again, looking thoughtfully at the hole. Vicious, not afraid. They even kill for fun. Like the mink, Will said. His voice was husky. Impatiently, he cleared his throat. Jane noticed with surprise that he seemed to have turned very pale. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and one of his hands was tightly clenched. Mink? Bran said. Don't have those in Wales. They look like those, only black. Or brown, I think. They enjoy killing, too. Will's voice seemed still strained. Jane watched him out of the corner of her eye, trying not to appear curious. There's a farm just around the corner. That might be why they're about the place in daytime. Bran seemed to have lost interest in the polecats. He strode off up the lane. Come on, it's a long way yet. Jane paused to pull up a sock and let the boys pass her, then followed alone and thoughtful. Above the farm, the lane widened a little. The grass banks dropped to a mere foot or so, topped sometimes by wire fencing. The way led more gently upward now through rock-studded grassland where Welsh black cattle grazed here and there or stood contemplatively in the middle of the road. Jane warily skirted a large bullock and tried to collect the elusive feelings that were running like quicksilver in and out of her mind. What was happening? Why was Will anxious, and why did Bran, on the contrary, seem to feel nothing? And anyway, who was this Bran? She felt a vague, formless resentment of the way his presence seemed complicated their relationship with Will. It's not just us anymore, she thought, the way it was last time. And over everything, she was beginning to feel a great unease about whatever lay ahead, as if some sense in the back of her mind were trying to tell her something she did not consciously know. Then, walking blindly on, she bumped into Barney and found all the others standing still in sudden silence and looked up and saw why. They were on the rim of a magnificent valley. At their feet, the hillside dropped into a sweep of wavering green bracken, where a few sheep precariously grazed on scattered patches of grass. Far, far below, among the green and golden fields of the valley floor, a road ran like a wavering thread past a toy church and a tiny farm. And across the valley, beyond its further side, patched blue with cloud shadows and dark with close-planted fir, there rolled in line after line the massing ancient hills of Wales. Oh, Jane said softly. Cumin Mufflin, Bran said. Happy Valley, said Will. Now you see why they called this path Panorama Walk, Bran said. This is what brings the cars, and walkers too, fair play. Wake up, Jane, Will said lightly. Jane was standing quite still, staring out into the valley, her eyes wide. She turned her head slowly and looked at Will, but did not smile. Throat is a little dry today, excuse me. I can't explain. Beautiful, lovely, but frightening somehow. Vertigo, Simon said confidently. You'll feel better in a minute. Don't look over the edge. Come on, Will said, expressionless, suddenly reminding her of Merriman. He turned and continued up the path along the edge of Happy Valley. Simon followed. Vertigo my foot. Jane said. Bran said curtly, frightening my foot too. If you start listening to silly feelings up here, you'll never stop. Will is enough to worry about without that. Astonished, Jane stared. But he had turned and was plodding up the road again with Simon and Will. She looked crossly after him. Who does he think he is? My feelings are in my head, not his. Barney stuck his fingers into the knapsack straps of his shoulders. Now perhaps you'll understand what I meant yesterday. Jane raised her eyebrows. Up on the hill over the sea, Barney said, there was a sort of frightening too, when I was sure I'd never been there before, and you both said rubbish, only I've been thinking, it's really more like living inside something that's happened before, without its really having happened at all. They went on in silence after the others. The rain began soon afterwards, a gentle, persistent rain, for the low-gray clouds that had been growing steadily larger and begun to merge now into a covering over all the broad sky. They pulled anoraks and raincoats from the rucksacks and went doggedly along the high moorland road between open grassy slopes with no shelter anywhere. One by one, cars came back down the road past them round one last bend. The paved road ended at an iron gate, and a foot-worn earthen track went on instead, past a lone white farmhouse and away over the mountain. 5 cars were parked tipsily on the grass before the gate. Back down the mountain came a straggle of damp holidaymakers with drooping headscarves and complaining children. "There's one thing to be said for rain," Barney said. "It does wash the people away." Simon glanced back. "Gloomy-looking lot, aren't they?" "Those 2 kids from the blue car still thumping one another. I suppose anyone would look gloomy with brats like that." "You aren't long on the brat stage yourself, chummy." Barney opened and shut his mouth, hunting the right insult, but then glanced at Jane instead. She stood silent, unsmiling, gazing at nothing. "You aren't still feeling odd, Jane?" Simon peered at her. "Look at them," Jane said in a strange, small, tight voice. She pointed ahead to Will and Brad trudging over one after the other up the track through the grass. 2 matching figures in oilskins, rather too big for them, distinguishable only by Brad's cap and the sou'wester pulled low over Will's head. "Look at them," Jane said again miserably. "It's all mad. Who are they? Where are they going? Why are we doing what they want to do? How do we know what's going to happen?" "We don't," Barney said. "But then we never have we?" "We ought not to be here," Jane said impatiently. She tugged the hood of her anorak closer over her head. "It's all too vague, and it doesn't feel right, and—" The last words burst out defiantly. "I'm scared." Barney blinked at her, out of the folds of an enveloping plastic mackintosh. "But Jane, it's all right. It must be. Anything to do with Great Uncle Mary. But Gummery isn't here." "No, he's not," Simon said, "but Will's here, and that's just about the same." Surprise sang through Jane's head. She stared at him. "But you never liked Will, not really. I mean, I know you never said anything, but there was always—" She stopped. Firm ground seemed to have become suddenly shaky. Simon was now so much bigger than she, as well as being almost a year older, that somehow she had imperceptibly begun to take him more seriously than before, paying attention to his opinions and prejudices even when she disagreed with them herself. It was unnerving to find one of those opinions turning itself upside down. "Look," Simon said, "I don't pretend to understand anything that's ever happened to us with Great Uncle Mary and Will. But there's not much point in trying, is there? I mean, basically, it's very simple. It's a matter of, well, there's a good and bad side, and those 2 are absolutely without question the good side." "Well, of course," Jane said pettishly. "Well then, where's the problem?" "It's not a problem. It's that Brad. It's just... Oh dear, you wouldn't understand." Jane poked dolefully at a tuft of grass. "They're waiting for us." High up on the path beyond the farmhouse beside another gate, the 2 small dark figures stood still, looking back. "Come on, Jane." He patted her tentatively on the back. Barney said in a sudden rush of discovery, "You know, if you're really scared, it doesn't like you, you ought to think whether you are being—" He flapped one head vaguely. "Being got at." "Got at?" said Jane. "The dark," Barney said. "You remember the way it makes something wriggle into your mind and say, 'I don't want you. Go away.' Makes you feel something terrible is going to happen." "Yes," Jane said. "Oh, yes, I do remember." Barney hopped in front of her like some small, fierce animal. "Well, if you fight it, it can't get hold. Push it off. Run away from it." He grabbed her sleeve. "Come on, race you up the hill." Jane tried to smile. "All right." They rushed up the path to the waiting figures on the hill. Raindrops scattered from their coats as they ran. Simon followed more slowly. He had been listening with only half his attention. The rest had been caught while Barney spoke by 2 sinuous red animals slinking into the bracken from a thicket of gorse, and then out of the gorse. If he had not been imagining it, 2 bright pairs of eyes watching them. But it seemed a bad moment to mention that to Jane. Brad said as they watched Barney and Jane running towards them up the path, "What was that all about, do you think?" "They could just have been discussing whether it was time for lunch," Will said. Brad pulled his glasses down his nose, and the tawny eyes regarded Will steadily for a moment, between the dark lenses and cap. Old one, Brad said softly. You know better than that. Then he pushed his glasses back and grinned. Anyway, it's too early. But Will looked somberly down at the approaching figures. The light needs those three. It always has, in this whole long quest. So the dark must be watching them very hard now. We must stay close to them, Bran. Especially Barney, perhaps. Barney came panting up to them, his hood flapping on his shoulders and his yellow hair damp dark with rain. When's lunch? He said. Bran laughed. Carn March Arthur is just over the next slope. What does it look like? Without waiting for an answer, Barney was gone, trotting up the path, Macintosh flopping. Bran turned to go after him, but Jane was in his way. She stood there, breathing unevenly, looking coolly at them both in a way Will did not recognize. It won't do, you know, she said. We're all marching along as if everything was ordinary, but we just can't go on pretending to one another. Will looked at her, patience, battling urgency in his mind. His head dropped for a moment to his chest. He let out a short hiss of breath. All right. What do you want us to say? Just something about what we might find up there, Jane said, quavering, exasperated. About what we're doing here. Bran was on his words like a terrier at a bow before Will could open his mouth. Doing? Nothing, girl. You will probably have nothing to do but look at that valley and a lake and say, oh, how pretty. What's the fuss? If you don't like the rain, wrap yourself up and go home. Go on. Bran, Will said sharply. Jane stood very still, eyes wide. Bran said angrily, to heck with it. If you've seen the raising of fear and the killing of love, the dark creeping in over all things, you do not ask stupid questions. You do what you're intended to do, and no nonsense. And so, that is what we should all be doing now, going on to where we might perhaps find out the next right move. And no nonsense, said Jane tightly. Simon came up behind her, silent, listening, but she paid no attention. Right, Bran snapped. Watching Jane, Will felt suddenly that he was seeing something he had never met before. Her face was drawn into furious lines of emotion that seemed to belong to someone else. You, Jane said to Bran, pushing her hands fiercely into her pockets, you think you're so special, don't you? With the white hair and the difference, and the eyes behind those silly glasses. Super different. You can tell us what we ought to do. You think you're even more special than Will, but who are you anyway? We never met you at all until yesterday, in the middle of nowhere on a mountain, and why should we get into danger just because you... Her voice quivered and dwindled. She swung away from them up the hill towards Barney's small, eager, vanishing form. Simon began to go after her and then paused, irresolute. Special, is it? Bran said softly as if to himself. Special. That's nice. After all the years of people sneering and muttering about the boy with no color in his crepey skin. That's lovely. Special. And what is this about the ice? Yes, Will said shortly. Special. You know it. Bran hesitated. He pulled off his glasses and stuffed them in his pocket. That is separate. She knows nothing of that, and that is not at all what she meant. No, Will said, but you and I may not forget it for a moment. And you may not let go like that. I know, Bran said. I'm sorry. He looked deliberately at Simon as he spoke, including him in the apology. Simon said awkwardly, I don't know what all this is about, but you shouldn't be bothered by Jane flying off the handle. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't seem like her, Will said. Well, now and then she does it these days, a sort of flare-up, I think. Simon said confidingly, she's going through a stage. Maybe, Will said. He was looking at Bran. Or maybe it is Jane we should be watching specially. Come on, Bran said. He brushed raindrops from the brim of his cap. Car march, Arthur. They climbed on to the line where the green glassy slope met a gray sky. On the downward sweep of the path on the either side, Jane and Barney were crouched beside a small outcropping of rock, identical with every other rocky scar on the hill, but singled out by a slate marker like a label. Will came slowly down the path, his senses open and alert as the ears of a hunting dog, but he felt nothing. Glancing across, he saw the same blankness on Bran's face. There's a sort of carved out circle here that's supposed to be where the hoof of Arthur's horse trod. Look, it's marked. Barney measured the hollow on the rock with his hand. And another one over here, he sniffed, unimpressed. Pretty small horse. They are hoofed-shaped, though, Jane said. Her head was down, her voice slightly husky. I wonder what really made them. Erosion, Simon said. Water swirling round. With dirt rubbing, Brad said. Jane said hesitantly. And frost cracking the rock. Or the hoof of a magic horse coming down hard, Barney said. He looked up at Will. Only, it wasn't, was it? No, Will said, smiling. Hardly. If Arthur had ridden over every other hollow called Arthur's Hoofbrit, or sat on every rock called Arthur's Seat, or drunk from every spring called Arthur's Well, he'd have spent his whole life traveling round Britain without a stop. And so with the knights, Barney said cheerfully, to sit around every hill called King Arthur's Round Table. Yes, Will said. He picked up a small white quartz pebble and rolled it round and round in his palm. Those two, some of the names mean other things. Barney jumped up. Where's the lake, the one he's supposed to have taken the monster from? Liln Barfog, Brad said, the bearded lake, over here. He led them on down the path into a hollow between hilltops, curving round a slope. The rain, which had been gentle, began here to whip at their faces in uneven gusts. As the high wind eddied round the gullied land, the cloud was low over their heads. Such a funny name, the Bearded Lake, Jane said. The words were aimed at Brad, though she walked without looking at him. Will felt a pang of compassion for her groping, unspoken apology. Bearded, not exactly romantic. I'll show you one in a minute, Brad said without rancor. Watch where you tread. There's boggy patches. He strode ahead of them, all dodging tuskets of reedy grass and marked wet ground. And then Will looked up, and suddenly there ahead of him through the driving rain he could see the far side of the Happy Valley again, misted and gray. But this time on this side, on the very own steep edge overhanging the valley, there lay a lake. It was a strange, small, reed-edged lake, little larger than a pond. Its dark surface seemed curiously patched and patterned. Then Will saw that its open surface was rippled by the wind, that not only a small part of it was open, a triangle at the closest end of the lake, all the rest of its surface, from the edge of the valley to a trailing V-shape in the center, was covered with the leaves and stems and creamy white bloom of water lilies, which are beautiful. And from a singing in his ears like the sudden rise of waves on a loud sea, he knew too that somewhere up here, after all, was the place to which they were intended to come. Something waited for them here, somewhere up this rolling, rock-strewn mountaintop between the Happy Valley and the estuary of the Duvy River. Through a mist that was not the rain in the air but a blurring inside his mind, he saw with a vague distant surprise that this feeling did not seem to have come to Bran. The white-haired boy stood on the path with Simon and Jane, one hand raised over his eyes against the wind and rain, the other pointing. The Bearded Lake, see? It's the weed on the water that gives it its name. Some years, when there's not much rain, it gets much smaller, and the weed is left all around it like a beard. John Rowland said perhaps the name is not from that. Perhaps long ago there was much more water in the lake and it would spill out over the edge of the mountain and down into the valley in a waterfall. That could be too, but a long time ago indeed, the way it looks now. The little lake lay dark and silent under the shifting gray sky. They could hear the wind whining over the hills and rustling through the clothes. Down in the valley, far away in a curlicue, gave its sad, ghostly call. Then closer by, somewhere, they heard a muffled shout. Barney turned his head. What's that? Brad looked across the lake at the slope that seemed to be the highest point of the mountain on which they stood. He sighed. Visitors, shouting for the echo. Come and see. Will lagged behind as they balanced their way one after the other along the muddy, rocky-strewn path edging the lake. And I used to do this all the time. Whenever I was on a high-up ledge or high mountain or high hill, I would always yell, echo, echo, echo. And I would always, catch the sound bouncing back into the air. And it's awesome. Which reminds me of one of my favorite myths, the story of Narcissus and Echo. Yes. Well, actually, we have read that. We have read that for Storytime a while back. We've read that story, and it was pretty good. Yeah. That's right, I have that on my shelf. That's totally right. Anyway, let's continue. Will lagged behind as they balanced their way one after the other along the muddy, rock-strewn path edging the lake. He gazed out once more across the water and its white-starred green carpet of weed to the far shore where the land fell abruptly away into the hills. The rain blew back into his eyes, the mist whirled over the hills, but nothing came into his consciousness, nothing spoke to him. There was only the strong sense pulsing through his mind that they were in the presence of the high magic, in some form he did not understand. So then Will followed the others along the path and round the next high slope. He followed them to go to bluff overlooking a flat hollow in the hills, perhaps 50 yards square, a space much like the one occupied by the bearded lake, but here holding only the bright patches of coarse, reedy grass that warned of marsh. A man and woman wearing startling orange anoraks stood lower down the slope, with 3 children of assorted sizes roaming about them, shouting across the flat green hollow. A steep cliff-like rock on the opposite side threw an echo. Hey! Hey! Ooh! Ooh! Baba, black sheep, black sheep, black sheep. Hey, fat face, 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 face. Jane said, if you listen carefully, it's really a double echo. The second very faint. Fat face, shouted the most rakshous of the children, again delighted with himself. Not our heroes, but these visitors that are being silly. Barney said in a clear, precise voice, funny how people can never think of anything intelligent to shout to make an echo. It's like never knowing what to say to find out if a microphone's working, Will said. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. The English master at school has a very rude rhyme he uses for that, someone said. You can't shout rude rhymes for an echo, Barney said coldly. Echoes are special. People ought to sing to them. Sing, said Jane. The small children were still screeching at the mountain. She looked at them with distaste. Well, why not? Or do some Shakespeare? Simon was Prospero last term. Why not a bit of that? Were you really? Brad looked at Simon with a new interest. Only because I was the tallest, Simon said deprecatingly, and had the right kind of face. Fat face! Shouted all the awful children together. Oh, really? Said Jane, losing patience. What's the matter with their stupid parents? She swung around irritably and walked a little way back down the slope. The wind seemed less gusty here. The rain had calmed to a fine mist. Underbrush scratched at her ankles. The slope was thicker with heather and low-growing bilberry bushes, studded here and there with tiny blue-black berries among the leaves. The other voices receded as she wandered away. She thrust her hands deep into her pockets and hunched her shoulders as if to shake something from her back. Black dog on my shoulder, she thought wryly. It was the family term from a brief bad mood, generally her own these days. Yet somehow this time Jane felt there was more than a mood invading her mind. There was a strangeness she could not define, had never known before, a restlessness, a half-fearful anticipation of something part of her seemed to understand and part not. Jane sighed. It was like being 2 people at once, living with someone without having the least idea what the other would do or feel next. A flash of orange caught her eye through a gap in the hilly skyline. The noisy family was leaving, the mother dragging one rebellious child crossly by the arm. They disappeared behind the slope, heading for the path. But Jane did not go back to the others. She wandered aimlessly, still on her own, through the heather and the wet grass, until suddenly the wind was cold on her face again and she found she was back at the bearded lake. From behind, she heard a faint laugh and a call from Barney, and then the same call again, a summons for the echo. She stood looking bleakly out over the dark, weed-shrouded water. At the distant valley beyond, the wind sang in her ears. The cloud of the heavy gray sky was so low now that it blew ragged over the hilltop in white tails and tatters of mist, whirling down to the lake, curling, blowing away into the valley. The whole world seemed gray, as if all color had drained from the summer grass. In an eddy of the wind that brought a sudden stillness after it, Jane heard Simon's voice faintly behind her, a sudden snatch of sound. Thou earth, thou speak! And very faintly indeed, perhaps only in imagining, she heard the echo, speak, speak. Then in some words came in another voice, clear and strange, and she knew that it was Brad calling in Welsh, and again the echo came faintly back, bringing the words to her again, familiar even while meaningless. The wind flurried, the mist blew in a ragged shroud over the far side of the lake, hiding the valley, and on the echo of Brad's call, as if following a cue, a third voice came, singing so high and sweet and unearthly that Jane stood without breathing, caught out of movement, feeling very stilled muscle, and yet as totally transported as if she had no body at all. She knew it was Will. She could not remember if she had ever heard him sing before. She could not even think or do anything but hear. The voice soared on the wind from behind the hill. The voice soared up on the wind, distant but clear, in a strange, lovely line of melody, and with it, behind it, very faint and a flowing descant, came the echo of the song, a ghostly second voice twinning with the first. It was as if the mountains were singing. And as Jane gazed unseeing at the clouds blowing low over the lake, someone came. Someone in the shifting grayness, a patch of color began faintly to glow red and pink and blue, merging into one another too fast for the eye to follow. Glimmering soft and warm on the cold mountain, it held Jane's gaze as hypnotically as a flame, then gradually began to focus itself, and Jane blinked in disbelief as she realized that a form was taking shape around it. Not definite clear shape, but a suggestion. A hint of what might be seen with the right eyes. The brightness grew more intense until suddenly it was all contained in a glowing rose-colored stone set into a ring, and the ring on the finger of a slender figure standing beside her, leaning a little as if resting on a stick. There was at first such brightness around the figure that Jane could not look directly at it. Instead, her eyes flickered down to the ground on which it stood, only to realize with a shock that no ground was there. The figure was floating before her, an isolate fragment of whatever world lay there behind the grayness. It was the delicate form of an old lady. She saw now, wearing a long, light-colored robe. The face was fine-boned, kindly yet arrogant, with clear blue eyes that shone strangely young in the old cobweb-lined face. Jane had forgotten the others, forgotten the mountain and the rain, and forgotten everything but the face that watched her and now gently smiled. But still the old lady did not speak. Jane said huskily, "You are the lady, Will's lady." The lady inclined her head, a slow, graceful nod.
"And since you can see that much, I may speak to you, Jane Drew. It was intended from the beginning that you should carry the last message."
"Message?" Jane's voice came out in a whisper.
"Some things there are that may be communicated only between like and like," the sweet, soft voice said from the mist. "It is the pattern of a child's game of dominoes, for you and I are much the same, Jane, Jana, Juno, Jane, in clear ways that separate us from all others concerned in this quest. And you and Will are unlike in your youth and your vigor, neither of which I share."
The voice grew fainter, as if with a great weariness, then rallied, and the light glowed more brightly from the rose-colored ring on the lady's hand. She drew herself upright, and her robe showed clear white now, bright as the moon over the gray lake.
"Jane," she said.
"Madam?" Jane said at once, and without any self-consciousness, she bowed her head and dipped one knee almost to kneeling, oblivious of her jeans and anorak, as if she were dropping on a deep curtsy of respect out of another age. The lady said clearly, "You must tell him that they must go to the lost land in the moment when it shall show itself between the land and the sea, and a white bone will prevent them, and a flying May tree will save them, and only the horn can stop the wheel, and in the glass tower among the 7 trees they will find the crystal sword of the light." Her voice wavered, ending in a gasp, as if clutching for some last strength. Jane said, struggling to hold the words, struggling to hold her image of the lady, "In the glass tower among the 7 trees, and a white bone will prevent them, and a flying May tree save them, and only the horn will stop the wheel."
"Remember,"
the lady said. Her white form was beginning to fade, and the glow dying in the rose of the ring. The voice grew softer, softer.
"Remember, my daughter, and be brave, Jane. Be brave.
The sign died. The wind whirled. Jane stared desperately out into the gray mist, searching to see the clear blue eyes and the old lined face, as if only they could fix the words in her memory. But she was alone among the dark hills and the lake with the low clouds blowing, and in her ears only the wind and the last imagined thread of a dying voice. But now, as if it had never left her consciousness from the first instant, there came instead the clear, high, echo-twin melody of Will's voice, that seemed to her like the mountains singing. Suddenly, the singing broke off. Will's voice flung through the air in a hoarse, urgent shout. "Jane! Jane!" The echo followed it. "Jane! Jane!" Like a whispered warning. In a quick instant, Jane swung towards the voice, but saw only the green slope of the hill. Then she looked back at the lake and found that in the brief moment of her turning, such horror had arisen before her that panic engulfed her like ice-cold water. She tried to scream and brought out only a strangled croak. Out of the dark water, an immense neck rose, swaying before her, dripping, tipped by a small pointed head, open mouth, black tooth. 2 horn-like antennae moved sluggishly to and fro on the head, like the horns of a snail. A fringe like a mane began between them and ran down the whole length of the neck, bent to one side by the lake that hung from it, dripping slimily into the lake. The neck rose higher and higher, huge and endless, gazing in motionless terror. Jane saw that it was everywhere a dark green, shot with strange, dull iridescence, except on the underside that faced her, a dead silvery white like the belly of a fish. High over her head, the creature towered and swayed menacing. The air was filled with the stench of weed and marsh gas and decaying things. Jane's arms and legs would not move. She stood staring. The great serpent lunged to and fro towards her, nearer and nearer, blinding, searching. Its mouth hung open. Slime dripped from the black jaws. It swung close to her neck, reeking dreadful, and seemed to sense her. The head drew back to strike. Jane screamed and closed her eyes. And that's where we will end for today. Now, to the untrained eye, that sounds like if I remember correctly, the proper term is a plesiosaur, which are the underwater long neck brachiosauruses of the sea, aka Loch Ness or Nessie. Even Cleveland, Ohio, has had some strange pictures and videos of a long-necked sea creature coming out of Lake Erie. It's a total thing, and you can look it up online. But we'll figure out what this mysterious creature is. Is it a friend of the light? Is it a creature of the dark? Is it just a ancient creature that just got woken up by the presence of Will and Bran? We don't know, but we'll find out next time. Bye, lovelies. I'll see you. Bye-bye.